1,000 pine points to you, Joe. You were the first one here. Hey, Hagatha. Good to see you. It's been a while. Glamrock, welcome. Alias fake name. I wasn't planning to do this, and I really need to thank Mike Winger. I think without Mike Winger, my life would have no meaning and purpose. It's like I was expecting to have a boring evening, and then I came home from my son's basketball game and saw this video, and I thought, wow, this is great. Something to do. Something to give my life meaning and purpose. Oh, let me turn off the music. So... This is so funny. The reason why it gives me meaning and purpose is because I'm looking a little red. Hang on a second. This is not right. Let me change my color. It's not that I'm blushing, folks, because look what, see, I just do that and then, oh, maybe I am blushing. Will leave me on the little pink side. I'm medium rare tonight. But yeah, it gives me great meaning and purpose to comment on videos like this from Mike, and it kind of makes me chuckle because I sense defensiveness. Sorry, it just sounds like Christians are being defensive and downright scared that there's this movement or a way of communicating that's causing maybe some Christians to doubt. And this is striking fear and terror and sadness in the hearts and minds of so many Christians. But the reason why I titled this, How to Convert an Atheist to Christianity Using Street Epistemology, is because, as we're going to see later, if you want to reach a guy like me, how would you do it, Mr. or Mrs. Christian or Miss Christian? How in the world would you reach a guy like me? How would you even begin to talk to me? Would you just start making claims and assertions and saying, you can't explain this. Where did the world come from? Where did life come from? You can't explain that. You don't have real meaning. You don't have ultimate meaning. Like, is that how you would talk to a guy like me? Like, if you really, really cared about PineCreek, sorry, Doug, if you really cared about Doug and you're a Christian, I mean, you really do care. And you want me to be a Christian because you think it's true, and because it means it has eternal consequences, right? What would you say to me? How would you even begin? You wouldn't just try to tick me off, would you? And make me angry and defensive? What would you do? You would slowly and gently ask me questions, try to really get to understand my position, what would change my mind. And you know, there's some Christians who have done that with me, and I applaud them. They do a good job. But there's other Christians who just say, well, you know, it ends up being at the end of time, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, and repent before it's too late, you're going to go to hell. I think even Christians realize that that type of talk doesn't really work. So, so the goal for a Christian, if they want to convert me, if they really cared, is to figure out exactly what's going on with Doug. What is really going on? What's the driver? What's holding him back? Was he hurt by someone in the church? Does he have a problem with evil and suffering? Like, is it because of his sister with MS? Is that the real issue? The fact that he's so angry at God that God didn't heal his sister? Is that the real issue? Is the real issue that Doug just really doesn't understand the textual evidence? How can we talk to a guy like Doug without him feeling defensive, without him striking back? I suggest Christians learn street epistemology. and use that type of Socratic questioning to get at the root, instead of wasting time on all the peripheral stuff, to get at the root of why Doug doesn't believe. Now, some Christians will just say, well, Doug is hard-hearted and he'll never, ever change his mind. He's no better than that, what's his name, Matt Dillahunty type guy. But no, I've answered those questions honestly with a lot of Christian apologists saying what would change my mind, and it would be akin to a major miracle. And but then I would still allow a little bit of room for doubt, for questioning, for being open to belief revision, that maybe it wasn't the Jesus God who did it, maybe it was a different God, or maybe no God at all. So yeah, I'm going to start with the end. 44 minutes, 50 seconds into this. This is question period. And this is the reason why I'm doing this video, the main reason.
Who's manipulating someone else by asking them questions has first been manipulated. That's why they're doing it in the first place. And that's what I wanted to make this video about. Now, I asked you guys for questions. A couple times I said, hey, we're going to prioritize questions from atheists, skeptics, non-believers. I got one question from a non-believer. We got 300-something people watching live. I got one question from a non-believer. I'll read it to you guys here.
300 people, one non-believer has a question. There's a chance, Mike, that while you were live streaming, there was only one Street Epistemologist watching. I hate to break this to you, but you're not very popular amongst Street Epistemologists or atheists in general. And in fact, my guess, Mike, I don't know this for certain. I could be totally wrong, but my guess is I get a higher percentage of non-atheists and other theists, a higher percentage of Christians watching my channel than atheists watching yours. That's just a guess, but I really do think so. For you to be shocked that you don't have questions, most people don't care about street epistemology, Mike. Even atheists, a lot of atheists don't even care. So, but I think I know why you care and why other Christians care is because it is actually effective.
From Insects Are Cool, she's been following my stuff for a while, and I really appreciate you being here. She says, I don't know.
Joe, you're right. Doug was predestined to be a vessel of wrath. See, scripture like that is what causes Christians to doubt. You don't even need street epistemology. You just read them like that some people have been predestined for wrath. And some Christians say, if that's the type of God I'm worshiping, I'm going to stop it.
I have a challenging question this week, so I'll just ask you if you have any book recommendations besides the Bible for atheists. I think Josh McDowell's Reasons is a really good book. Also more than...
So the reason why I'm doing this video is because you were basically begging for questions from street epistemologists or atheists or whoever. Boy, I'm still looking red. I got to fix that. There we go. That's a little bit better. But that makes my green screen a little weird, but oh well. So let's start at the beginning now. And I probably will play this at 1.5x, and I'll make some comments as we go.
Atheist. I think that this manual is actually hurting atheists' ability to reason about ultimate questions. This is kind of a big deal. Like your ability to reason about ultimate questions about life, the purpose of life, God, Christianity, Jesus. Some use it very sort of religiously. They follow it very closely, but many also, they just borrow from this book and from the concepts of this book, and it sort of trickled down to them. But I think that the pillar issues, the big issues that are in this material are the things that have trickled down. I'm not going to just be critiquing this book in every way possible, nitpicking every single thing about it. Rather, I want to talk about pillar issues, central problems with the whole venture of street epistemology as it's laid out by Peter Bogosian in this book, as it's practiced by guys like Anthony Magnabosco. So hi, everybody.
I'm just reading the chat, not on my chat, but on Mike Winger's chat. And someone asked for me to hop on there. It would be nice if you hopped on PineCreek again. Oh, no, someone asked Mike Winger to hop on my channel. That might happen in the future. We'll see.
I hope you can hear me okay. My stuff tells me it's all good, and I don't see any warning signs in the chat. You can put your questions in the chat. Please say, put a Q in there if it's a question, and if you're an atheist or skeptic, put atheist or skeptic there, and then type your question so that we know
Welcome,
we can
Greg.
prioritize those. Now I'm going to move as quick as I can through this content, and this might be the kind of thing you want to watch again later, but something to think about. Let's consider these things. So the manual for creating atheists is this book here that I've been going through. Me and a few other apologists have been looking at this book and talking about it for a little while now. And it says the purpose of the book on page 15, Peter Bogosian writes, is, quote, "This book will teach you how to talk people out of their faith." That is the agenda. That is the purpose of the book. Oftentimes, street epistemologists will...
Now, Mike will get into this, but the way Peter Bogosian defines faith, I'm sure the way he defines it, a lot of Christians would agree with Peter Bogosian, that if that's how you're defining faith, then yeah, maybe we should talk people out of believing things for bad reasons or pretend to know things that they really don't know.
They'll say, people who practice this stuff will say that that's not really their goal, but that is...
By the way, for the record, what's his name? Gregory Kokel called me a Peter Bogosian disciple. Full disclosure, I have never read Peter Bogosian's book, A Manual for Creating Atheists. Basically, I got interested in street epistemology because I saw Anthony Magnabosco do it probably 5 years back. And I just watched a couple of videos, and I knew exactly what he was doing from the get-go. And then I started using it with my conversations with Christians, and the conversations went much better.
Very strongly, very clearly the goal of Peter Bogosian's book, but he also in his trainings he tells people to hide this, and that I mean, that's deceitful, but that's not the core issue. Okay, that's just so you know. Some street.
I'm not sure about that. If Peter Bogosian tells people to keep hush hush of what you're really doing, but that definitely doesn't describe me. People who come on my channel or watch my channel, they know if I'm interviewing them, they know what they're getting themselves into. All my cards are on the table. In fact, when I've been interviewed about street epistemology, I've joked, but it's somewhat serious because I know how conservative Christians think. When they ask what's the purpose of street epistemology, I'll tell them it's to lead the youth to hell. And it strikes terror and then I'll give a little smirk. And because I don't think that's what street epistemology is doing, but from the conservative evangelical mindset, that's exactly what's happening here. This is why they're so defensive about it, because if hell's a real place and these atheists are using this technique to cause the youth to doubt, whoa, this is a terrible thing that street epistemology is. It's a horrible thing. Young people are going to go to hell because of this.
Epistemologists will say, Mike, that's not really our goal. I'm saying it's clearly the goal of the book, and he trains people to say it's not their clear goal, so that's a problem. It's basically a set of tactics, a series of a procedure, and it's really simple. It's a procedure that you take people through to get them to doubt the things that they hold dearly when it comes to beliefs about God, religion, and sometimes they'll expand this to other things.
It's interesting that Mike uses the phrase "hold dearly." I agree with him here, but this is why street epistemology is needed, because people do have beliefs that they hold dearly. What does dearly mean? That means it's close to their heart. It's like they hug these beliefs. These beliefs are a part of their identity. And so when you're talking to someone who believes something so strongly, you just can't talk about facts. This is what boggles my mind, because I think Christians actually, a lot of Christians at least, actually agree with this. Just forget about religion for a second. Think about politics. Do you guys honestly believe that people make their choices or they hold their beliefs based on facts and evidence for the most part? You guys really believe that, Christians? I'm talking to you now. Think about all the people on the other side of the political aisle who disagree with you on, let's say, abortion to big government, small government, all these things. And for you, you might be thinking, the evidence is so crystal clear. Why can't these people see this? I would say, I don't know, I'm just going to throw a percentage out there, but 80% of the time, we humans make our decisions based on intuitions, our gut, or our emotions, or whatever. And this has served us well throughout history because it's kept us alive. Because if we actually took time to think about things on a level 2 reasoning, by the time we're done thinking through everything, a lion has eaten us. This is why humans are like this. And so if 80% of the time, and again, don't quote me on 80%, I'm just throwing out a number out there, but if 80% of the time we're making decisions on things other than facts and evidence, then it's not going to be talking about facts and evidence that's going to change people's minds. This is exactly what Peter Bogosian was getting at in his book, a book I haven't read, but so I hear. And guys like Jonathan Haidt and other psychologists, I think even, what's his name, Jordan Peterson talks about this. There's something else going on here. And Christians, just think about all those atheists that have been presented the gospel clearly. Why don't they automatically accept it. There's something else going on. If this was truly about facts and evidence, wouldn't they convert? The evidence is so clear, right? Why aren't they converting? There must be something else going on. See what I did there? I kind of used... Never mind.
But the general focus tends to be God, religion, whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, whatever it is that they believe in. Most often I see it used towards Christians. And I'm going to quote several places in the book. We're only going to be looking at the first couple chapters. If you guys like what I'm doing and you want me to look at some more content from the book, let me know. Put a comment down there. Say, hey, please continue this. It was fruitful for me. It was helpful for me. Okay, what is a street epistemologist? According to him, it's a coined term, right? The phrase street epistemology is a new term that he's using to refer to this tactic of someone who goes out into the street, or basically they're not in classrooms, they're not in lecture halls, but rather they're going out into the street, into churches, into other locations to talk to people about what they believe, to get them to stop believing those things. Let me quote to you from page 15 in his book. He says, the goal of this book is to create a generation of street epistemologists, people equipped with an array of dialectical and clinical tools who actively go into the streets, the prisons, the bars, the churches, the schools, and the community, into any and every place the faithful reside, and help them abandon their faith and embrace reason. Now that phrase, abandon their faith...
Okay, now right now I can tell you that a lot of, if not all, Mike Winger's followers, when they hear this, they're just thinking about Christian faith right now. They don't realize that Peter Bogosian's talking about faith in the Republicans, faith in government, faith in certain medicines, homeopathy, faith in certain cult leaders, faith in Islam, faith in Mormonism, faith in Hinduism. Now, in every of those situations I just brought up, I think a lot of Christians say, yeah, Peter Bogosian might have some great ideas, great methods to talk to some of these people who just won't listen to the facts and evidence. When it comes to, it's clear that the Book of Mormon is incorrect, right? If only we could just figure out a way how to talk with these Mormons. So, and actually, I think there are a few Christian street epistemologists out there who use some of these tactics to talk to Mormons and Muslims and so forth.
Is going to be abrasive to people who actually have faith in God or faith in something like that. Because it's pejorative. And throughout the book, this is consistent. He's always very negative about the concept of faith, negative about people who believe and about their reasons for believing and about the things they believe. But I think that that's part of the goal of the book. See, I don't think this book is written for Christians. I don't think this book is meant for Christians in any way, shape, or form. I think it's written for people who are either on the fence or they're non-Christians. And it's going to, in my opinion, brainwash them in a few very important ways that will cripple their ability to think clearly about God and clearly about Christianity.
Brainwash them. Reading a book will cause them to be brainwashed. I'm thinking of a verse right now from my Christian days, take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. That is basically a verse that's saying you need to embrace the brainwashing of the Holy Scripture. And as soon as you start to doubt from God's Word, aka the Bible, you need to turn around and take that thought captive and make it obedient. Make it obedient. Be a slave to the belief that this is true. Talk about brainwashing. Like, now, any hardcore committed Christian listening to what I just said, really offended. But there's going to be some fence-sitting Christians who are going to hear what I just said and agree with that and say, yeah, I can see how that's kind of advocating brainwashing.
And that is why I want to talk about it. So,
but it's different because it's true, right?
Negative statements about faith, the disdain for faith, the disdain for Christianity, things like that. That's part of the brainwashing that takes place here. And I get this sometimes when I try to engage regularly with non-believers in friendly, honest discussions. Oftentimes there is a disdain for the things that I'm holding to be true. And I see it come across in atheist videos online where they'll often misrepresent Christianity with really not even caring if they're misrepresenting it or not.
Yeah, I have, after the years and years of talking with Christians and so forth, I've come to the conclusion that that's just always is going to be the case. A Christian is, I shouldn't use the word always, but most of the time is just going to feel like they're being misrepresented. Like, I'm a very efficient type guy in my job and my work. I like get to the bottom line, get to the root. And so when I actually think I'm good at this, but when I can condense a paper into one sentence, but when I do that with theology, when I take Christian theology or why they believe something, if they talk a long time and I sum it up in one sentence, one short sentence, it's like, oh, I just don't understand. I've misrepresented because I didn't say everything exactly what they said.
And I think that this comes not strictly from this book, but I think it's expressed in this book, and it's a serious issue that cripples your ability to think clearly about God. So in chapter 1 basically just introduces the topic, Street Epistemology. It's only a few pages long, very brief. In chapters 2 and 3, though, he gets into what he calls the core ideas. Chapter 4 and beyond gets into the actual strategies of how you talk people out of their faith, but chapters 2 and 3 are really important, and Peter Bogosian tells people, don't skip these chapters. These are core, these are central, and I agree, these are core. In fact, I think that this is where the pillars, of wrong thinking get locked into the mind of the skeptic who reads this book and absorbs this material. And
again, the word skeptic is not a euphemism, what's the word? It's a derogatory term to call someone an atheist. I don't think Mike is using this in the philosophical way at all. I think it's just someone who just is skeptical, doesn't believe something very easily. And I think Christians are skeptics too. They're just skeptical about different things.
It gets locked into your mind, and you're no longer able to think clearly. So allow me to explain. I know this sounds like I'm making bold statements here. Well, they are bold, but I think they're factual and true, and I want to demonstrate it to you. The first thing he does, and pretty much the entire venture of chapter 2, is all about redefining terms, giving new or selective meanings to words, so that when we use these words now, we have a filter we're putting on the world, because we're going to have this sort of narrow meaning of these of these words. The biggest word he does this with is the word faith in this book. It's the word faith. Now, I have a whole video on the definition of faith. I've linked it in the description below. I'm not going to get into all that stuff today.
Pejorative, yes, that's the word I was looking for.
I'll talk a little bit about it today, but there's a whole video, an hour long, going through the text of Scripture, showing that this definition.
I think when it comes to the word skeptic, I think if you're a non-Christian, even if you're a Muslim or a Mormon, start calling Christians skeptics, because they're skeptics of the Quran, right? They're skeptics of the Book of Mormon. Call the Christian a skeptic from now on.
The faith that Peter Bogosian gives is so wrong. It's wrong from the dictionary, and it's wrong from Christian theology. It's just wrong, period. But this is Peter Bogosian's definition of faith. Are you ready? He says, quote, faith is, here's the quote, pretending, oh, sorry, I jumped ahead of my own notes. This is what he says faith is. Faith is belief without evidence, or pretending to know things you don't know.
Okay, belief without evidence, pretending to know things you don't know. Now, the problem here is, and I think a lot of Christians listening on the replay are going to agree with what I'm about to say. A lot of Christians hold this definition. Not all, but a lot. In fact, a lot of Christians who are pastors and apologists kind of hold this definition. I'll use the word kind of. I just did a short video on, what's his name, Leighton Flowers, where he talks about Matt Dillahunty wanting all this external evidence and not finding it for God. But it's the inner, the still, quiet voice. I think that's how he put it. He was, and he used the word faith to describe that still, quiet voice. It's not demonstrable. It's quiet. It's not external. It's internal. So here you have a pastor, and I'm singling him out because it's the most recent. But there are so many Christians and even pastors who will say basically what Peter Bogosian is saying, that if you actually know something, I say I know that when I let go of this pen, it's going to fall. I know that. Now, of course, if God is real, if the biblical God's real, I really don't know it, do I? Because it could go up if I let go, because he could do a miracle. But I don't think Christians know that Jesus rose from the dead in the same way, or even close to the same way as I know this pen's going to fall. I think most Christians, I'll even use the word most, doubt the resurrection of Jesus Christ way more than they doubt that the pen will fall when I let go. So in that way, this is what Peter Bogosian is meaning. He means that when you say that you know that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, you're pretending to know something that you really don't know. The closest we can get in this world of saying we have certainty of knowledge is things like this pen falling. The resurrection from 2,000 years ago based on texts, ancient texts? No, not even close.
Pretending to know things you don't know. This is kind of a big deal. Faith is pretending to know things you don't know. And this is something he'll repeat as a mantra throughout the book. In fact, there's a chart I'll show you in a minute that comes from the book where he tries to reinforce this and tries, I mean, this is brainwashing. I want to get you, not like the hard kind where you're torturing someone, but this is
if Peter Bogosian is brainwashing, then I would say a large percentage of Christians are brainwashing other Christians. Do you deny this, Mike?
I want to get you to repeatedly think something that's wrong until it gets embedded in your mind and becomes the way you see the world and the way you engage with Christians or anybody who says they have faith. So is faith pretending to know things you don't know? No, I can quote lots of dictionaries here. And it's true that there'll be a line in the dictionary that says something like belief without evidence. But you have to understand how like dictionaries work, right? There's multiple uses of a single word. You don't just
There's multiple uses of a single word, just like atheism.
just pick one of those uses and then apply it everywhere that word is used, which is what Peter Bogosian wants to do. What you do is you have to actually say no. Sometimes it's just confident trust, confidence, and entrusting of yourself to something or someone, belief in God. You know, there's these different uses of the word, and we have all of them in our English language. Peter wants to narrow it down to this belief without knowing anything, or pretending to know things you don't know. Let me actually show you what we're talking about here. This is from his book. There's my thumb. Hey, thumb. He says, when you hear a Christian or someone of faith, a religious person, say that they, quote, have faith in God, you should interpret them in your head as saying, you see the second side of the chart, I pretend to know things I don't know about God. If they say life has no meaning without faith, you should, in your head, repeat it back to yourself this way.
Okay, now, if you're a Christian listening to this, this is really offensive. But I want you just to imagine, what's a good one? I guess we'll stick with Mormonism, even though a lot of people call Mormons Christians. Imagine a Mormon saying, no, that doesn't work with Mormons. Let's go with Hinduism. So imagine a Hindu saying, I have faith in God. And when they say God, they're talking about Krishna or Vishnu. And then wouldn't it be true from the Christian point of view that the Hindu is saying, I pretend to know things I don't know about Vishnu? Life has no meaning without faith. Now remember, view this from the Hindu. The Hindu life has no meaning if I stop pretending to know things I don't know. Now the Christians say, of course not. That's not true. So it really helps if you're a Christian watching right now to put this in the perspective of a belief system, a religious system that you clearly 100% disagree with.
Life has no meaning if I stop pretending to know things I don't know. If they say I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, then you should hear them saying, I don't pretend to know things I don't know enough to be an atheist. I could go on. There's this chart. It's like 3 pages. I'm just showing you a piece of it here of just list, you know.
So I agree with Mike in one sense that a lot of people define faith as confidence, trust. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But I think if you're intellectually honest, you'd say there's a lot of people who do define faith as believing something without, let's say, complete evidence, or believing something without any evidence, sort of like you didn't see the person pack the parachute. You have no idea who this person was, but you have faith that whoever packed that parachute when you go skydiving did it the correct way because of government standards or the reputation of the firm that does the skydiving. You have faith. You took a leap. You took a step. I think a lot of, if you knew with 100% certainty, in fact, if you packed the parachute yourself, that was packed the right way, would you really need faith at that point? Would you need trust in yourself at that point? Maybe a little bit, but...
One after another of him brainwashing you about the word faith. He says that if you hear someone say, you have faith in science, you should interpret them as saying, you pretend to know things you don't know about science. If they say you have faith, your spouse loves you, you should hear, you pretend to know things you don't know about your spouse's love. If they say, if everyone abandoned their faith, society would devolve morally, you should hear, if everyone stopped pretending to know...
Oh, Glamrock, good question. This book was written in 2013. Winger just discovered it now. Great question. I actually think, as you'll see, there'll be other YouTubers coming in. Now, I admit, what I'm about to say is going to be very, very cynical. But I actually think that they're just trying to get views. There's going to be a couple of YouTubers come in. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's not about views. Maybe they think all of a sudden in 2019, Street Epistemology is taking off more. I don't know. But this was 5, 6 years ago. This book was written. Why are they like? And there's been videos before this. Why now? I think it's because guys like Cameron Bertuzzi and Greg Kokel, they can sort of play off this and warn their flock that, because remember, leaving Christianity is the worst thing you could do because it's true. And not only that, but if you don't do it, you'll become either depressed or go to hell forever, or there will be moral decay in society. So there's a lot on the line here. So really, they should be talking about this every day.
Know things they don't know, society would devolve morally. If they say, my faith is true for me, which is a weird thing to say, I agree, but you should interpret them as saying, pretending to know things I don't know is true for me. If they say, why should people stop having faith if it helps them get through the day? You should hear, why should people stop pretending to know things they don't know if it helps them get through the day? If they say, teach your children to have faith, you should hear, teach your children to pretend to know things they don't know. Guys, this isn't targeted to Christians. Certainly not to a biblically minded Christian, someone who's learned to think biblically about these topics. Because that's not faith in the Bible, not even by a long shot. And please, if you're going to quote Hebrews 11:1, please go into the link and click my video and watch it. And there's a link in that video to a whole article on just Hebrews 11:1, because we care about these things and we think about these things. But if you believe Peter Bogosian's portrayal of faith, then when I tell you that I have faith in Christ, you think I'm making a statement that I have no reason to trust in Jesus. So how can you take me seriously? How can you even consider my thoughts and my beliefs seriously?
I agree with that, Mike. If someone is defining faith that way, they're not going to take you seriously. But I do want to say to you that there's a lot of Christians who do define faith that way. And some of these Christians are even pastors.
By the way, this is...
Because they will talk about the Holy Spirit. They will talk... In fact, Mike, you even agree with this, that two people can know the evidence for the resurrection at as high as level as you can know it. And one can be a Christian and one not. What's the difference? I've asked this question to many apologists, and the honest ones will say, because of the Holy Spirit, Doug. One has been regenerated to have the scales lifted from their eyes to see it.
Peter Bogosian, I meant to show you this a minute ago. Peter Bogosian is an American philosopher. He is an assistant professor of philosophy at Portland State University. His areas of academic focus include atheism, critical thinking, pedagogy, scientific skepticism, and the Socratic method. We'll come to the Socratic method in a little bit. He's a philosopher, and for this reason, he should know better. This book, in my opinion, has very bad philosophy.
I'm adjusting the speed. I can adjust the speed in increments of 0.1 using my Chrome extension, and so I'm speeding up, slowing down, because I want to get through this as quickly as possible before Jesus returns.
Not just in it, but undergirding its very core message. And I think it makes it hard for you to think about God. So what is faith? Well, it's not that. Then it's going to come into defining atheism. I'm going to make sure I didn't skip something here. By the way, again, you can put your questions in the live chat.
So remember, faith is a word that can be defined many ways. Mike just admitted that. And now we're going to define atheism.
And I have some mods there who are going to help me out, and AJ is going to send me those questions later. I'll be answering them. And stick with me, guys, till the end, because as soon as this live stream's over, I'm going live on Capturing Christianity's YouTube channel. And there's a link in the description for that. And I'm going to go live with John and Cam, and we're going to talk about the series we just finished, the 20.
This picture right here is, I think, why Mike's talking about Street Epistemology today, because he's trying to get more viewers or build a bigger channels amongst all the 3 channels.
Answering 20 arguments against God that we just finished. It was a great series, and we'll be doing that immediately after this live stream at 6 p.m. my time, whatever time it is your time, in 41 minutes approximately. Okay, he also goes on to redefine not just faith, but redefine atheism and define agnostic in a peculiar way. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think I should devote a whole video to the topic sometime, but he says, quote, he quotes someone rather in his book, quote, I contend we are both atheists. I just believe in one fewer God than you. And this is pretty consistent throughout the book. It's a lot of the sloganizing that we've heard from some of the new atheist movement stuff, which upon critical evaluation is just embarrassingly.
So again, if I was a Christian listening to this, I can put myself back, in those days. Just assume Mike's right about everything, but how do you touch the life of the unbeliever? Hey, thanks, Craig Duncan, for the donation. How do you impact? How do you really talk to the unbeliever, the atheist, the Muslim, the Mormon? And I think what Peter Bogosian, the principles that he's espousing here, will work for you guys, you Christians. Why don't you try it?
bad thinking. You believe in just one. That's like saying I believe nothing exists. And then you say, well, I believe the universe exists. And I go, no, you're pretty much the same as me. You're a nothingist. Because you see, we both believe all those other universes don't exist. You just believe in one more universe than me, or you know, whatever. I can just give example after example of how this thinking doesn't work in real life. On page 27 of his book, he writes that atheism, quote, as I use the term, means there's insufficient evidence to warrant belief in a divine, supernatural creator of the universe. However, if I were shown sufficient evidence to warrant belief in such an entity, then I would be a believer. There's a problem with this, right? And I've defined faith as pretending to know things you don't know. I've defined atheism as a statement about the evidence, not about my position. There's insufficient evidence. That's how you define atheism. So just by the existence of atheists, it means that there's no evidence for God. This is like not how we think clearly about things.
What? Mike, you lost me there. Sorry, I gotta back this up.
There's a problem with this, right? And I've defined faith as pretending to know things you don't know. I've defined atheism as a statement about the evidence, not about my position. There's insufficient evidence. That's how you define atheism. So just by the existence of atheists, it means that there's no evidence for God. This is like
no. Peter Bogosian's not saying that. What are you talking about, Mike?
Like not how we think clearly about things. Atheism is a position. Like I'm of the position that there is no God. Like this is not complicated, but it's being made complicated because it's going to be a battle over definitions, because that's what happens when it's about, you know, brainwashing, instead of an issue of dealing with the facts. We'll come back to avoiding facts in a minute.
I have no idea what Mike just said there. Does anybody in the chat know what he's talking about?
One of his strategies. Imagine if I defined vegan as a person who doesn't enjoy brutality toward an immoral exploitation of innocent living beings. Now, everyone who's not a vegan is a person who enjoys brutality toward an immoral exploitation of innocent living beings. This is not rational. No, a vegan has nothing to do with that. Now, maybe a vegan is right that that's brutality and exploitation, but that's not the definition of vegan. And to stick it into the definition is to smuggle in ideas so that you can...
Oh, boy, you know what popped in my head when you said that, Mike? You're smuggling in ideas into definitions? How about the definition of objective morality? Any smuggling going on there? That it has to be from a god or outside the material universe? How's that for smuggling things into definitions?
Like win the conversation without actually having reasons or evidence or anything like that. And this is kind of what he does with atheism. Atheism becomes a claim about evidence instead of a claim about his position. Now, this kind of just sucks agnosticism into atheism, and this bothers agnostics sometimes that they're being like claimed by atheists a lot of the time. But he defines agnostic, this is the third word he defines in chapter 2. He defines it as someone who, quote, agnostics think there's not enough evidence to warrant belief in God, but because it's logically possible, they remain unsure of God's existence. And again, this is making the definition of agnostic about the evidence for God, and that has nothing to do with it. It's irrelevant. Agnostic, I don't take a position. I don't know if there's a God or not. Easy peasy, man. That's what it means. That's what it's been. But we move on. So, in summary, chapter 2, so far, he defines faith in a way that's meant to make it irrational.
I in my mind, I'm thinking, do I address this? And I think I've decided no. Not worth it.
He defines atheist in a way that's meant to include both saying that there's no evidence for God, but also to give the atheist no burden of proof to demonstrate any sort of claim.
Yeah, Kevin Martin, this is what's happening. Christians are really tired. They're sick and tired of always having to do the defending, always having the burden. Now, Christians will admit they do have a burden, but they want atheists to have some burden too. You just can't sit on your chair and say, well, I don't make any claims ever, so you can't ask me for evidence like I can of you. And I empathize with that sentiment. I really do. But the thing is, what do you do with a guy like me? I am honest with you when I say things like, I'm not omniscient. There could be a deity, whatever that means, of some sort that is immaterial, whatever that means, that created the universe. However, that deity could have done it. I don't know. Now, a lot of Christians will hear me say that and say, well, Doug, you're not an atheist, you're an agnostic. But then I'll say things like, I don't live my life like any gods exist. I don't have any active beliefs that any gods exist. Then some Christians will say, Doug, you're an atheist. So you can call me whatever you want. But that's what I believe or don't believe. This is how I live or don't live. Now, do I have any burden? Do I need to provide evidence that there is no God possible No, because I'm not making the claim that there's no God possible out there. I have a video where I think a lot of atheists got upset with me, but I have a video entitled "There Are No Good Reasons for," capital F, capital O, capital R, "There are no good reasons for atheism." And I am happy to say that. Because I just think that atheism, when you look at all the reasons for theism, falls short, insufficient. And so what's the word that you come up with when you're not convinced by any form of theism? Atheism.
And then he suggests...
I tried as hard as I could not to use the word default position, but I just used it.
You can read chapter 2. He suggests removing agnostic from the table because he's basically stolen a chunk of agnosticism and kind of made this hybrid atheism thing, which is very common nowadays. But a philosopher should know better. And this is the stuff you have to do in your positions based on your rationality. That's what it looks like to me. Now, I hope you stick with me. I'm not trying to irritate or aggravate. These are statements about facts and reasoning here. And page 28, he says, after triumphantly redefining words so that he has literally redefined reality based upon the definition of these words, he says, now that the terms faith, atheist, and agnostic have been clarified, we can have a meaningful discussion about belief without evidence being an unreliable way to navigate reality. Let me translate. Now that I've defined words in a way that make you dumb and me right, I can go on to show you how right I am and how dumb you are. That's what this is.
There it is. This is what I've been saying for years, and Mike just admitted it.
How right I am and how dumb you are.
It's interesting because the things that I get blamed for, misrepresenting, Mike's taking some liberties here and saying, this is what Peter Bogosian's really saying, that you Christians are dumb. Now, I can't help but, what's the word? Is this projection? Is this like your insecurities, defense mechanisms? I'll claim right now that the Christians that watch my channel, a lot of them do feel dumb. A lot of them do feel intellectually inferior. And this is why apologists actually make money, because that's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling to have cognitive dissonance, to not know things, to have doubts, and to feel intellectually inferior to another person. To have that person say something, ask you a question, and not know an answer. So what happens is a lot of Christians will pay money, support guys like Mike, so they can stop feeling that way. At least help them stop feeling that way. And Mike's admitting that. It's just like this whole culture of by the way, this is why I think a lot of Christians are more likely to use words like fallacy and logic and reason in the last decade or two than even an atheist will. Because of this insecurity, they've been beat up so badly and made to feel so insecure that they've overcompensated by having to use, like, they'll just come out of the gate. I've had so many conversations. They'll just come out of the gate and say, that's not logical, Doug. You're committing a fallacy, blah, 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 blah. And I think it's from what Mike's talking about here is that they think that they're viewed as dumb, or they feel dumb.
That's all this is. This is not complicated. Now, he's really smart. I mean, he writes very well. It's clever. It's thoughtful. He uses big words. But it's not reasonable. And you can be intelligently unreasonable. And you can be, stupidly reasonable. And the world is full of such people. But this is just intelligently unreasonable. So he's not done yet. On page 29, chapter 2, he says, faith is an epistemology. And this is huge. This is like a central pillar of the book. Okay? Faith is an epistemology. Peter Bogosian wants you to...
I don't know if he... Well, I haven't read the book, but faith can definitely be an epistemology. I think Christians agree with that. There are some Christians who do use faith as an epistemology, as a way of saying that they know things. How do you know this, Mr. Christian? I have faith. How many times has that been answered? Now, I know a lot of Christians say that's a bad answer, but that some Christians do answer that way. Agreed? So in that case, faith is an epistemology. It is a way of coming to knowledge, or at least claiming to have come to knowledge.
To think that faith is how you come to believe something.
Glamrock, Mike Winger is a Protestant, evangelical, Calvary Chapel going, I would say a 9 out of 10 conservative, evangelical, Christian, believes in traditional form of hell, probably believes in a young earth, but who knows. Definitely doesn't believe in evolution via common descent. I think that's true. He's basically me, except worse 20 years ago.
Not how you hold to those beliefs. Let me quote it to you. He says, a branch of epistemology is, quote, a branch of philosophy that focuses on how we come to knowledge, what knowledge is, and what processes of knowing the world are reliable. In other words, it's the old, how do you know that question? That's what epistemology kind of is, to put it crudely. It's like, how do you know that? 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 Hard questions to answer sometimes, but epistemology is trying to answer those questions. He says faith is an epistemology. It's how I come to know things. Well, I've got actually a friend of mine. I have a few friends going to be joining us today. Tim Barnett from Stand to Reason. He tackled this question, sent me a video today, and I want to play this little clip for you from Tim. I hope I've got the audio balanced. It might be too loud or too quiet. I'm going to try and get it fixed for you if it's not.
Oh, I didn't know Tim Barnett. I watched this very quickly before. Tim Barnett is the guy I did a video on and congratulated Tim Barnett that he did a good role playing of an atheist, and then he used me. I think he uses me on his channel to get some street cred.
If it's not good, but this is his response to Peter Bogosian's claiming that faith is an epistemology, which is a terrible and wrong idea.
So you want to know what problems I have with Peter Bogosian's book? Well, where do we get started, right? Yeah, there's a number of issues that I have with his book. Probably the main thing, though, is his mischaracterization of faith. And not just the definition of faith, belief without evidence. We could go there, but I have another issue, and that is how he characterizes faith. And that is he puts it in the category of an epistemology. In fact, over and over again in the book, he says that faith is a failed epistemology. The problem with that is it's not an epistemology at all, okay?
For some, Tim, it is. Whether right or wrong, Tim. Do you deny this? I bet you don't. In fact, I'll bet you 100, I'll bet you a C note that you're willing to admit that some Christians do use faith as an epistemology.
Okay. Faith is not...
I can name one right now. What's his name? Craig. Well, he has a YouTube channel. I think he's admitted that to me.
The biblical faith is not a way of knowing, it's a way of trusting, okay? And that's why, a standard reason, we like to use the word trust instead of faith, so people don't get confused on this. So it's not a way of knowing.
Whoa, what did he just say? I think he might have caused problems.
Okay? And that's why, a standard reason, we like to use the word trust instead of faith, so people don't get confused on this.
We want to use the word trust instead of faith so people don't get confused. Does that mean the word trust and faith are two completely different things?
So it's not a way of knowing. This can be demonstrated over and over again in the New Testament as well as the Old Testament. For one, look at Mark chapter 2. It talks about Jesus healing the paralytic. And in there it says, Jesus turns to them and says, so that you may know, there's that word, that I have the authority to forgive sins. What does he do? He turns to this paralyzed man and has him get up and walk, okay? So there's evidence.
Yes, that is evidence, Tim Barnett. Hey, DB Cisco, thank you so much. Jay Richley, thank you for your donation. I enjoy your hobby. Thank you. You're welcome. Tim Burnett, you're exactly right. And you know what? I'm going to be really honest and real and sincere here with you. This is the evidence I crave. What you just said, that's the evidence I crave. You know how much better my life could be if I could force myself to believe this? Wow, that's great evidence. Unfortunately, I haven't seen that. Have you? Tim Burnett, have you seen what you just described? Let me rewind what you just said.
Oh, no, there's that word. That I have the authority to forgive sins. What does he do? He turns to this paralyzed man and has him get up and walk, okay?
Yeah, my sister's completely paralyzed. I know my sister's situation. There's going to be no trickery, chicanery with my sister. Wow, would that be great evidence if, Tim, you could come in to my sister's hospital room, pray for her in the name of Jesus. Not the name of Vishnu, not the name of Allah, but in the name of Jesus. In fact, I'll get a Muslim and a Mormon there too, and a Hindu. And then all of you guys can pray for my sister. And we'll see who can make the miracle happen, just like Jesus did. That is great, great evidence.
Okay, so there's evidence, so they know who he is so that they can now trust him when he says, I can do this invisible thing, like forgive sins. Okay? So there's knowledge and trust coming together. Okay? But they're not the same thing. They're different. Okay? And so faith is not an epistemology. Actually, responding to Bogosian's book, William Lane Craig, who's a philosopher, okay? I have a master's degree in philosophy, but he's a philosophy professor. He said,
you have a master's degree in philosophy? I feel like betting another C note that it's a philosophy of religion.
He says this, listen to these words. He says, this is so fundamental. This is a watershed. He, Bogosian, says that faith is an unreliable epistemology. He wants to make faith an epistemological category instead of a moral virtue. He goes on to say, it is right there that we need to dig in our heels and say that this is a misunderstanding of faith. Faith is not an epistemological category. Faith is a way of trusting something. Faith is trusting in that which you have.
Why? Okay, if you're an atheist listening to this or even a non-Christian, why are these Christians pushing back so hard? They're pushing back so hard because if you say faith is an epistemology, a method of saying you know things, then you got to be intellectually honest and apply that to Islam, to Mormons, to Hindus. Anybody who uses faith as a method can say they know things, but Mormonism is false, and Islam is false, and Hinduism is false, and so forth. So we can't use. So they have to distance themselves from that definition, even though you'll find so many Christians who do use faith as an epistemology.
Reason to believe is true. Remember Mark 2? He provides the miracle so that they trust. Okay, knowledge and trust. Faith is trusting in that which you have reason to believe is true. So it is once that you have come to believe in something is true, using reliable epistemological means, that you can then place your faith or trust in that thing. To do so is a virtue, is what William Lane Craig says. So here it is. I know this is 3 minutes now. It's supposed to be 1 minute. So faith and knowledge are connected, but they're not the same thing. And this is where Bogosian goes wrong. Okay, they're different categories.
So why use the word faith at all, Tim Burnett, and just say trust? Like, why is there a special word called faith instead of trust?
Faith is not a way of knowing. Rather, it's a way of trusting in what you know to be true.
So instead of trusting, why isn't it just faithing? Instead of faithing or having faith, why isn't it just trusting? Why do we have two different words? Is there any difference between trust and faith?
All right, take care, buddy. See ya.
This stuff is not that complicated. But the thing is this, like... to some, everything I say is going to just sound like, oh, it's just pastor preaching stuff, but this is about like logic and reasoning and rationality and just thinking things through. And what we're saying here is, this isn't how you think things through. Faith is not an epistemology. That's just bad. But it's a pillar of the Street Epistemology movement started with Peter Bogosian's book. Listen to this. It gets worse. There's more. I got to move forward. So his chief argument in his book, page 30, this is what Peter Bogosian says. He says, I'll briefly explain what I find to be one of the principal arguments against faith. Principle. This is number one, right? If a belief is based on insufficient evidence, then any further conclusions drawn from the belief will, at best, be of questionable value. Believing on the basis of insufficient evidence cannot point one toward truth. So he's saying that I define faith as belief with no good evidence, no reason, and then I go, hey, what do you know? If you have faith, then you should stop, because I've defined it as being belief without evidence, and now I'm calling it an epistemology. These are two pillars that are both false, factually false, that this stuff is founded upon. And it's not tripping me up. It's tripping you up if you're the skeptic that's swallowed this stuff. This is just wrong thinking. He goes on and on. I want to say thanks to Tim, by the way, for helping me out and sharing that content. Really good stuff. Okay, he finishes chapter 2 with the dangers of faith, and that's what he'll get into in chapter 3 as well. It's just an all-out assault on the concept of faith, or trusting anything for that matter, it seems. These examples of the dangers of faith are like strung together examples of things people do in the name of religion that Bogosian hates. And it would basically, if I was reading this and I were the skeptic, perhaps not super aware of these things, I would think, man, yeah, religion is the cause of all the evils in the world. But I could give an equally long list, in fact, longer list, of things that people do that are wonderful and that are as a result of their faith, even in my own life, as well as the lives of those around me, as well as historically. And it's just, this isn't good reasoning. It's not good thinking. In chapter 3, Bogosian gets...
Yeah, you notice that Mike uses the word reasoning, good thinking, reasonable. Christians and apologists are trying to just, with all their might, try to pull away from this idea of faith and going to things like logic, reasoning, syllogisms, and fallacies, and so forth. The reason why they're pushing this so hard is because they do feel a lot of them do feel intellectually inferior, that they believe these crazy things, and so they have to kind of build it up.
gets into what he calls doxastic closure, belief in epistemology. That's the title of the chapter. But ultimately, it's just more brainwashing about faith. And I'm going to quote to you a few of the things he says about faith, and then I'll quote to you how he's going to romanticize street epistemology.
Kevin Martin says, do you think Mike's sincere? Yes, I do think he's sincere in his beliefs.
Because he's going to put these two, like the street epistemologist is at war with faith, not those people who have faith, but they're at war with faith. They want to destroy faith in the heart of a person, and that's according to Bogosian.
My question would be for Christians watching, based on Peter Bogosian's false definition, but if you to assume it for a second, is it good to destroy faith? Wouldn't you want that faith destroyed? So if Peter Bogosian's defining faith as pretending to know things you don't know, wouldn't you support Peter Bogosian in destroying that type of faith? Yes or no?
Some take a much more gentle approach, but this is the Kickstarter of the movement right here. So here's what he says about faith, and then I'll read what he says about street epistemology and how he wrote.
Another question, Glamrock, why is he latching on to Peter Bogosian when he hasn't been relevant for a long time? I don't know, but I think it's because it's an excuse to do networking with Tim Barnett, capturing Christianity. What do you mean? There's other guys are going to be coming in here, and I think this is a sort of a networking, getting views type deal. But the reason why I'm doing this is because at the end, you rewind it, you'll see.
Romanticizes it. It's like the most beautiful thing in the world. It's lovely. You should kiss it and hug it. All right, page 43, he says, faith taints,
and he does mention me,
removes our curiosity about the world.
No, I'm not back on nicotine gum.
What we should value and what type of life we should lead. Faith replaces wonder with epistemological arrogance disguised as false humility. Like, this is just propaganda. Like, this isn't true. Do I have to demonstrate that this is not true? This is silly. Page 44, he says, the street epistemologist seeks to help others reclaim their curiosity and their sense of wonder, both of which were robbed by faith. I have a lot of faith in God, in Christ, in the scriptures, in Christianity. I have a lot of faith. It has not robbed me of any wonder or curiosity in the world. In fact, a lot of my intellectual pursuits have been driven by the fact that I believe the universe is the way it is. I think the universe was made by a genius. I think that it has purpose and beauty for me to discover. I think humans are amazingly made and worth attention, relationship, and honoring. There's a God, and you think that removes the wonder that I would have, or the curiosity that I would have, or the questions I have about value. It spurs them all forward 100 times more. On the other hand, like if I were an atheist, I would be a nihilist, because I think logically that's the conclusion of atheism.
Yeah, yes, right there. Right there is why Christians don't want other Christians or themselves to leave Christianity.
I have about value. It spurs them all forward 100 times more. On the other hand, like if I were an atheist, I would be a nihilist, because I think logically that's the conclusion of atheism.
Yeah. This is street epistemology I'm going to do without Mike even being here, but this is what drives guys like Mike. Mike has doubts. He does. Now, he might not have doubts at the second, but he's had doubts, and he will have doubts in the future. He's a human. That's why I can claim that. I think he's human. But what he just said is the fear that if I don't believe in a God, I'm going to be suicidal, and I don't want to die. If there is no God, and if I stop believing in a God, why not rape someone? These are the fears that go through the minds of Mike and his followers, and a lot of Christians. These fears are real. And this is why Peter Bogosian made the book that he wrote. This is why guys like Jonathan Haidt say the things they say, is because these fears, these emotions, is what drives beliefs, not just for Christians, for all human beings. And it drives people's beliefs hard. Fear, love, hope. This is why people believe what they do. And again, I'll say that like 80% of the time. And once in a while, us fallible human beings can look at evidence and use reason properly and sometimes get close to what we think is true.
No morality, no purpose, no genuine beauty, no real love, no.
This is what Mike is saying right now is exactly why street epistemology is needed. Listen.
On the other hand, like if I were an atheist, I would be a nihilist, because I think logically that's the conclusion of atheism. No morality, no purpose, no genuine beauty.
No morality, no purpose, no genuine beauty.
No real love, no personhood.
No real love. Like, if you're a human being listening to this right now, and you're hearing, what? If I become an atheist, I'll have no morality, no real love, no genuine beauty. I forget exactly everything he said. Like, what is Mike doing right? He's saying, these are all horrible things. No morality, no genuine beauty. This is atrocious. Don't become an atheist, because if you do, this is what will happen to you. What Mike is doing is effective. This is what keeps people Christian. This is what causes people to become Christians. This is brilliant what Mike is doing if his goal is to keep people Christian or get people Christian. Because what he's doing right now is appealing to emotion. All throughout this video, he's talking about reason and logic and stuff. But this is where the rubber hits the road. It's like a 60 seconds of honesty.
No free will, nothing lasts.
No free...
In every way possible.
No free will, nothing lasts. Oh, my goodness. And I just rewinded it to the beginning. I got to find it here. But yeah, this is why there has to be different methods to communication with people, is because these are the real drivers for belief. I apologize. Let me see. Let me see if I can find where I was. Yeah, 26:21. I'm going to get so much trouble for this. But there's going to be Christians listening to this and they're going to say, yeah, I hate them, and this Doug's right.
It has purpose and beauty for me to discover. I think humans are amazingly made and worth attention, relationship, and honoring. There's a God, and you think that removes the wonder that I would have, or the curiosity that I would have, or the questions I have about value. It spurs them all forward 100 times more. On the other hand, like if I were an atheist, I would be a nihilist, because I think logically that's the conclusion of atheism. No morality, no purpose, no genuine beauty, no real love, no personhood, no free will, nothing lasts, no meaning.
All what he just said is way more powerful than looking at the textual evidence for the Gospels. What Mike just said is way more powerful than any philosophical argument for a God. What Mike just said is way more powerful than the Kalam cosmological argument. What Mike just said is where the rubber hits the road, and why I think people are Mormons, why people are Muslims, why people are Hindus, why people are Christian. I think in a lot of ways atheists are freaks of nature and do struggle with a lot of finding meaning and purpose and so forth. But it's one of those things where you can't force yourself to believe something you're not convinced of. And you can find meaning and purpose even though it's just for this life and not for eternity.
I mean, there goes the wonder. That's on that worldview. That's not because I'm mad at atheism. That's just a consistent worldview. At least that's as I understand it. If I'm wrong, show me I'm wrong. It's not a personal attack here. So the second side, first side is demonize and mock faith and misrepresent it utterly and completely at the foundational nature of what it is. And then second, romanticize atheism. Romanticize atheism and doubt and make it as pious as possible. And I'll give you some quotes. Page 44 of his book, he says, the street epistemologist seeks to help others reclaim their curiosity and their sense of wonder, both of which were robbed by faith. I read this earlier about faith, but now think of what he's saying about the street epistemologist. Oh man, you're the hero, guys. You're saving the world one person at a time by helping them get rid of the faith virus.
Like, can you not see the flip side being true? Like, I know Christians don't say you're the hero for bringing someone to Christ, but it's like, if you're a Christian YouTuber and you are causing people to find Christ and become Christian, tell you just let that slip and say it out loud, you'll get more views, you'll get more support. You're kind of like a hero because God's using you in a way more so than others.
Virus, as he likes to call it, a faith virus. Page 45. As a street epistemologist, one of your primary goals is to help people reclaim the desire to know, a sense of wonder. You'll help people destroy foundational beliefs, flimsy assumptions, faulty epistemologies, and ultimately faith.
Okay, now, if you're a Christian listening, imagine he's talking about me destroying all the faith and the epistemologies and the beliefs of Christians. But now imagine I'm doing this with Hindus or Mormons or Muslims. And because you believe all those beliefs are false, correct, Christians? So am I doing something wrong if I do street epistemology to anybody but Christians?
Will destroy foundational beliefs, flimsy assumptions, faulty epistemologies, and ultimately faith. But the street epistemologist never goes out and says, hey, can I talk to you? Yeah, sure, what for? Well, I want you to help rediscover your sense of wonder, because your belief in God has totally destroyed your sense of wonder. And yeah, your flimsy assumptions, we got to get rid of those. Like, that's not how it comes off, but that's here at the foundation of it. Page 45, he says, helping rid people of illusion is a core part of street epistemologists' project and an ancient and honorable goal. Disabusing others of warrantless certainty and reinstilling their sense of wonder and their desire to know is a profound contribution to a life worth living.
I think what Peter Bogosian's saying there, Mike, is just that when you claim to know something and have knowledge and it's not 100% certainty, but as close as you can come, it does, some of the curiosity does go away. Some of that wonder does go away. And I think you agree with me. This is why children a lot of times are happier than adults who are like, imagine a 65-year-old, some PhD who's traveled the world, who knows a lot about the world and how it works and so forth, versus a 5-year-old who's just discovering the world for the first, 5 years of their life. The wonder is going to be bigger with the 5-year-old than the 65-year-old. This is why, the saying that as you get older, you get more cantankerous and more grumpy and more cranky. I think that's true. I'm becoming a little more cranky as I get older. And so what Peter Bogosian, I think, is saying is, look, if you claim you have all the answers for all these things, you're robbing yourself of some wonder. Just the ability to say, you know what, I could be wrong about this. In fact, it's plausible that I'm wrong. It's like 30, 40% I could be wrong. And so it causes you to be more curious and investigate further.
I mean, does believing in Christianity really kill my desire to know things? Does it do it for you, Christians? Do you not want to know things because you believe in God?
I actually think it can. Yes, Mike, I do. Like, for example, I very rarely watch other atheist channels. I mostly watch theist channels. But I wonder how many Christians, how many of the followers you have do what I do. I think very few. I think they're scared. I think a lot of your Christian followers are struggling. They're desperate. They probably email you weekly, daily, asking for help and prayers. And for them, for your Christian followers to listen to channels like mine, and that might cause a little bit of doubt, that doesn't feel good. That's very uncomfortable. And so maybe they do block themselves off from learning and discovering and having that sense of wonder by going outside their usual circles.
Really? This is just weird. But it's not for me. It's not for Christians. It's for atheists. To get them to marginalize and to have a filter through which they view the religious. The religious. They have a disease, a virus called faith. It robs them of a sense of wonder. Gosh, I'm morally obligated to help them get rid of that thing. That's the brainwashing.
Don't you think you're morally obligated to help the Mormon, the Muslim, the atheist, get rid of their misconceptions, their misunderstandings of everything, how they view the world? Don't you have a moral obligation to do what you can to save that impending doom called hell?
Throughout the book, there's an assumption that religious people have not really thought through the things that they believe, and if they did think them through, they would reject them. That's kind of an assumption that goes throughout the book. Of course, guys like me exist doing the things we do because I've thought it through, and I think I have good reason to believe. If I didn't, I wouldn't have this channel. You can say I'm incorrect or something in some respect, but the concept of this book is it's like talk about a straw man. It's embarrassing. At one point, I think I should point
everything, Mike, almost everything an atheist or not even a non-Christian says about Christianity or about you, your automatic inclination is to feel strawman or misrepresented or misunderstood. That's completely natural.
Point this out. He contradicts himself on faith a little bit. In page 45, he quotes David Hume, who said, quote, "A wise man proportions his belief to the evidence, See, I'm like, yeah, like I believe that. A wise man proportions his belief to the evidence. If I have good evidence for that, I should believe it. I should trust, and I should proportion my belief to the evidence. I agree with you there. But then he goes on in the next sentence, Peter Bogosian, his commentary on this quote is this: "It would seem to follow that someone's faith couldn't possibly be moved by reason." What? Yeah. This is not about faith. This is not about Christianity. This is about brain.
No, if you're defining faith in the way Peter Bogosian is, pretending to know things you don't know, then yeah, evidence, reason is not going to change that person's mind.
Brainwashing people, not torturous brainwashing, but like a soft brainwashing, getting people to not be able to think clearly about God and religion. So after he gets into the first two, chapters and into the third chapter, he starts to get into the tactics, the actual plan of attack that someone's going to have. So I've demonized faith, I've pietized, street epistemology, and I've done some word jangling, and I've got you to think that when someone says, I have faith in Christ, what they mean is I believe in Christ with no evidence and for no reason. And then they get into the tactics. Now, what will you do? You'll go out into the street. How are you going to change people's minds? And the tactics are, first lesson you got to learn is you have to avoid facts. Avoid facts. In fact, one of the guys who pushes this movement, probably the biggest guy on YouTube pushing this movement, Anthony Magnabosco, at least that I'm aware of, is he goes out and he does this. He's going out saying, hey, let's have questions about your deeply held beliefs, and he interviews people and he puts them up on his YouTube channel. One of the things that Anthony,
before we get on to facts, I have a challenge for any Christians listening who are anti-street epistemology. Here's the challenge: find me a video where a street epistemologist puts the definition of faith into the mouths of those listening, of those being interviewed, I should say, that they force that definition upon them. Show me a video where that's being done. Now, it might be out there. I haven't seen it. But all the videos I've seen, the street epistemologist will ask them what they mean by faith and get their definition.
Magnabosco will tell you is that you should avoid facts and that you should avoid apologists, like this guy, right? Like you should avoid apologists, avoid facts. Don't talk about those guys. You got the rare street epistemology.
I don't know. Does he say avoid apologists in his book? Maybe he does. I haven't read it. But when he says avoid facts, what he's talking about is if the reason for the belief is not facts or evidence, if it is indeed faith, then why waste your time talking about it? Why waste your time talking about the evidence and facts? So imagine a Mormon who just says they felt something and they came to the conclusion that the Book of Mormon is from God. And when you ask, well, how do you know this feeling's true? I have faith. Seriously, are you going to waste your time talking about facts and evidence if that's the core reason why they believe it? That's insanity if you do. You're just going to go around in circles. You're just going to argue. You're just going to debate. But you're not going to get to the essence of why they believe it.
Who will tackle apologists, like PineCreek, who I've encountered several times. He does do a type of street epistemology. Sometimes he'll say he does. Sometimes he says he doesn't. I don't know what he's saying today. Maybe he's in the comments section. Probably not.
I would say I do street epistemology rarely, especially on my channel. I do it more, and this is terrible, but I do try to do it on text, but text is a horrible way to do it. But there are a few videos, like this is the thing, when people think of street epistemology, they think of, is this a debate? No, it's not a debate. There's no winning, there's no losing. It's an interview. And I probably have done it like strict SE with Jonathan McClatchy that one time. And I don't think I've ever said this before, but I did it to show fellow street epistemologists that strict SC would not work with him, at least not the way they expect. Because what will end up happening is, the reason why, if Peter Bogosian did say don't talk with apologists, I think the reason why he says that is because apologists, have you guys noticed, bloviate? They just talk and talk and talk. If you can get an apologist to shut up, you've accomplished a great feat. And because they just feel the need to barf out everything that they think you don't know, and they do.
But yeah, the avoid apologists, avoid facts thing. I just want you to stop for a minute and just be like, forget the tactics for a second. Think about the concept of avoiding facts. Just think about it. What if a religious person came to you, skeptic, atheist, my friend? What if a religious person came to you and they said, avoid facts? What would you think of that? It doesn't sound wise. It doesn't sound like a good way to come to true beliefs. So avoid facts, avoid apologists.
You avoid the facts if you avoid at least certain facts if that's not the reason why they believe. Like, for example, let's take it off the Christian. Why in the world would you talk about facts and evidence of the resurrection of Jesus Christ through Habermas's minimal facts, whatever, if the real reason I'm an atheist today is because I was hurt by someone in the church? Come on, guys, think, use your brains here. If the real reason why I'm an atheist today is because I was hurt in the church, why in the world would you spend hours and hours talking about the minimal facts with me? What a waste of time. If I was hurt by the church and you want me to lead me to Christ, what you should do is not talk about Habermas or the minimal facts. You should sit by my side, put your arm around me, and say, sorry. I'm sorry these people did that to you, Doug. How can I help?
And then ask questions. And that is, in a nutshell, the entire tactic. Be very friendly. Don't tell them what you're doing, right? Don't tell them about the first couple chapters, right? But just ask questions. And they're going to be, how do you know that questions? Hey, so you believe in Jesus. Why? Well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know that? Well, how do you know that? And how do you know that? Great. Good conversation. Have a good day. And it's meant to instill in you a type of psychological doubt. Oh gosh, I had all these questions. I couldn't answer them all. There's a reason why this is tough, and I won't explain it to you. I'm going to let my buddy John from What Do You Mean? Surprise guest here. He made a video for us as well today. He's going to share with you why this whole asking people hard questions thing can be tough and can.
By the way, this, how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know that? This is what the presuppositional apologists do. And I don't, so if you're going to be consistent, Mike, you might want to talk to guys like Cy Ten Bruggencate, Matt Slick, and so forth. Although they've both changed, tempered themselves over the last few years, I've noticed. But it's basically a Socratic method as well.
Can be a little disingenuous when it's done in the method that is taught in street epistemology.
All right, so real quick, here's just a few of my thoughts when it comes to street epistemology. So, street epistemologists tend to ask a lot of questions, right? So they're just asking questions and asking questions, and I'm all for people asking questions if they're trying to gain clarity or if they're, trying to find the truth. But a lot of the times what you'll notice, and at least in the videos that I've seen, but also too with skeptics in general, they'll just play like hardcore skeptic, where they just keep trying to ask you questions to try to get you to trip up and try to see where you're vulnerable, so then they can claim victory. Now, there's a reason why this worked.
Okay, this actually boggles my mind, claim victory. Like, I'm 48 years old. It's no longer about competition. I can understand if you're talking about 18 to 22-year-old, especially males, who just need to feel right and need to conquer and need to, win. It's not about that. It's not about winning and losing. And the fact that I think a lot of Christians feel that way speaks volumes. That they feel like, I don't want to appear to have lost. Here's advice for the Christian listening. Take it or leave it. Purposely lose from the onset. If you're having a conversation with an atheist, declare defeat right away. If I was in a formal debate setting, that's what I would do. I'll say, you know what? You won. Mr. Christian, you won. You're probably right. You win. Now can we talk? Christians, try this. Try just being vulnerable and saying, you win. Yeah, I admit, I feel stupid sometimes for believing this stuff. But now can we talk, Mr. Atheist?
There's two reasons actually why it works that I can think of. One reason why it works is because they won't take a position. As long as they don't take a position, then they think that they don't have to apply those same standards towards their beliefs. So they'll say, hey, I'm just asking questions here. I'm just trying to gain insight. But do you see how that can be seen as manipulative? Also, too, what I'd say is that...
I agree. I agree with you. I forget your first name. Sorry. I admit that I have sometimes been manipulative. However, I would say most of the time it just feels that way for the person I'm interviewing because I am asking tough questions. And so it feels like a trap. It feels like I'm manipulating. But I do admit, because I'm human, that, and depending on the context, sometimes, you know, it's just a sparring or whatever, that I do purposely manipulate. I actually think all conversation is a form of manipulation, but whether subtle or what, or more extreme. But there are many times where I'll just say to the person I'm interviewing, I'm going to ask you a trap question now. Please be on guard. Embrace the trap. I don't know how many times I've said that. I basically said, I let them know, this is a trap question. Brace yourself. Here it comes. But the thing is, the Christian is so terrified of looking bad on video. They're so terrified of not having the answer. And part of the reason why I do this is I want to see if they're humble enough to just admit defeat. Like, who are you trying to impress, really? Like, if you're a Christian and you believe this stuff is real, you should be only impressing God, right? It shouldn't matter if PineCreek makes you look stupid in front of 1,000 people. Who cares if PineCreek makes you look stupid? It's only God that you're answering to. So embrace the trap. Let it come. Just do your best to answer it and move on.
A lot of times we may not know the source of some of the things that we believe because we haven't traced it back far enough. So, for example, if you just went up to someone on the street and you said, hey, what do you believe about George Washington? You know, and then they're like, oh, he's the first president. You're going to say, well, how do you know that? They say, oh, well, my parents told me, or I learned from my parents, or I learned in school. They'll say, oh, okay, do you believe everything you've learned from your parents or in school? Or, you know, or I read it in a book. Well, do you believe everything that you've read in books? Has anything that you've read in a book been wrong before? You know, and all those kind of things too. So when you do that to somebody and you catch them off guard and they're not prepared for it, then they're a little knocked off, right? And so then you give the appearance as if you actually did something significant, but in reality, you just put a person in a position where they weren't able to articulate, you know, or even probably haven't even thought about before some of the things that you question about them. So in some ways, I want to say that I'm in support of street epistemology when they're asking questions to gain clarity. But at the same time, I see that it also can be seen as manipulative. And with that, I think that we should take caution. All right.
I agree with most of what you said there. The only thing I would say is I don't think you need to be defensive or wary of, or have a huge need to be cautious. Like if someone, this is part of just being, I guess, mature or getting older. But at some point, you just have to say, if someone wants to make me look stupid, so be it. Like, there's the people who love me. I love them. They know who I am. It's no big deal if I look stupid once in a while. But I think for a lot of Christians, they can't do that. It's like, and pastors and apologists especially, because there's people looking up to them saying, these guys have studied, they have answers. And for them to admit and be vulnerable and say, you know, it's okay if I look stupid here, it's really hard for a lot of them to do that.
Right.
John just like looks cool no matter what. It's like a rule. Anyway, yeah, thanks, John, for sharing that. I think it's good insights, and I want to share now a clip from Cameron Bertuzzi from Capturing Christianity, who's
yeah, I am a Stoic, Gerard or Garrod, however you pronounce his name. I would say not philosophically, but emotionally, I'm a Stoic guy.
Gonna help if you're a Christian and you've encountered the street epistemologist. You know it because they just ask you question after question after question, and he has a couple words of advice for you on that. On how do you like deal with the sense of being bothered by being asked so many questions and not always being able to answer them. Here's his thoughts.
Hey guys, Cameron Bertuzzi here with Capturing Christianity. This is one thing that you want to keep in mind when you're talking with a street epistemologist. Seek the truth. When they ask you these questions, sometimes they can sort of throw you off and you don't really know how to answer. But just because you don't have a good answer to one of their questions doesn't mean that Christianity is false or that God doesn't exist. And more generally, street epistemology is not really about seeking the truth. It's about trying to like undermine your reasons for your belief in Christianity.
No, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily to undermine. It's to critically examine people's reasons for believing certain things.
So what you need to do is remember that just because you can't think of a good answer to some type of question doesn't necessarily mean that Christianity is false or even that your reasons are bad. You know,
but Cameron, what you're saying now can be applied to almost any religion. Any religion can say that. You know, just because a Hindu doesn't have the right answer or an answer at the tip of their fingers, that doesn't mean Hinduism is false. Of course, like you're not saying anything meaningful here, Cameron.
things that I point out is that testimony is actually a really great reason for believing that something is true. And in the Bible, we have testimony, right? We have these biblical authors who wrote down what they saw. A lot of the
That I disagree with. Testimony is a good reason to believe things are true. We have 7 billion people on this planet. We have 7 billion testimonies. How many Christians are on the planet? How many true Christians are on the planet today, Cameron Bertuzzi? Now, I know the Pew study says there's 2 billion, but you don't believe that. Do you? What, maybe 10, well, I'd say half? Half of the 2 billion are true Christians. Let's say 1 billion. So we have 7 billion testimonies saying that what they've experienced or whatever has led them to believe in whatever. And only 1/7 of them, the testimonies, end up being a testimony of something correct. Cameron, it's more plausible that your personal testimony or the testimonies you've heard, it's more plausible that they're false than true based on those odds.
the eyewitness testimony that's in there from Paul. So we have testimony about Christianity in the Bible. And so just believing based on reading.
No, you don't. You have Paul saying he saw a vision, and you have anonymous claims of things in the Gospels.
The Bible is actually legit.
I've given this challenge to many Christians, and I said, first person account says, "Hi, my name is so and so. I saw the risen Jesus. Show me in the Bible where that happened." I paraphrase. Paul's the closest, and at that he admits it's to Revelation, which could be a vision, the Damascus Road thing. But there's nowhere other than Paul. Peter's the closest, but even then he does not actually say that he saw the risen Jesus. He testifies to seeing the persecutions of Jesus, or the I forget how he phrases it, but anyhow, read it for yourself. Find it. Now, what apologists like Cameron and others will say, well, can't expect that for that time. Okay, can't expect that type of eyewitness testimony for 2,000 years ago, but I'm not going to lower my standards just for Jesus.
Legitimate answer. Now, beyond that, obviously, testimony can be false, right? So not everyone isn't always telling the truth about their testimony, but as a general principle, we have to accept the testimony of people unless we have independent reason to believe that that testimony is false or unreliable. So then,
why do we have to believe the testimony of people? Why do we have to?
We have to accept the testimony of people unless we have independent reason to believe that that testimony is false or unreliable. So then,
I flew last week. I went to Grand Canyon and I just jumped. Nobody was around to watch it. But I went to Grand Canyon last week and I ran and I jumped and I flew. Do you believe me, Cameron? Do you have to accept my testimony? Do you have any independent reasons to think what I'm saying is false? Because your God could have caused it, right? He could have caused me to fly. Do you believe me? You don't believe that for 1 second, yet you believe something even worse, because you can look at my eyes when I make that claim. You believe in worse evidence from 2,000 years ago.
the question would be, well, is the Bible reliable? Is it a reliable method or source of testimony? And that's going to be a deeper question that if you don't know the answer to that, then you need to start thinking about it and researching. But asking questions and this little street epistemology game is not the way that you're going to find out whether or not the Bible's reliable or that Christianity is true, or even if your reasons for belief are legitimate. So
you're assuming, Cameron, that that's the goal. The goal is to figure out why people believe what they do, what they believe and why they believe it.
Just keep in mind, seek the truth. Don't get thrown off by these questions. And yeah, all right. See you guys later.
All right. Thanks, Cam, for joining me. I'll actually be joining him in a few minutes. So remember, the link's in the description for our live stream over at Cameron's channel. Me, John, and Cam will all be together. But I got one more clip for you, and this is actually going to be from Greg Kokel. And this is the last clip I'll be sharing with you guys. And here's the thing. I like questions, and I thrive on asking questions and trying to get answers for them. But that's the difference between street epistemology and seeking truth. We're actually trying to get answers to our questions, and we're stopping with answers rather than just ignoring answers and asking more questions. If you hear a street epistemologist ask questions, don't care about your answers.
Watch. I can't help but think that Mike is just thinking about me throughout this whole video. Watch Anthony Magnabosco. Watch Reed Nice Wonder. Watch. There's so many, and forgive me, other YouTubers who are great at this, and I'm forgetting your names. deeper conversations, deeper discussions. Just what is it? Just ask. Watch them. And are they doing what you're describing, Mike? That they're just asking questions and just ignoring people? I think the reason why you're saying these things is maybe because of some of the conversations we had together and you just feel this way. Maybe some other conversations from people who are not even street epistemologists, not doing street epistemology, but they're atheists and they're asking you questions. And you just now have lumped everybody in one basket. You don't like it when atheists do that to Christians, right? Lumping all Christians. Like you don't like it if I was to lump you into the Joel Osteen basket? Of course not.
New question. Don't care about your answer. New question. That's a red flag that someone's not
street knowledge, right?
They're after doubt, and doubt is not a virtue. So here's Greg Koukl, and he has some things to share about.
Oh, Greg Koukl. By the way, he was on his last podcast, or someone sent it to me. He said that I was a Peter Bogosian disciple. I've never met Peter Bogosian. I've never read his book. But I thought that was funny, a disciple.
About the difference between his book, Tactics, and this book, The Manual for Creating Atheists. And thank you, Greg, for doing this. He just threw it together real quick today, and I really appreciate it.
Philosopher Peter Bogosian over at Portland State University, I think, has written a book that's titled A Manual for Creating Atheists. And of course, his goal is to have atheists read his book so atheists can make other atheists out of religious folk, including Christians. Now, I have written a book called Tactics, a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions. Ironically, both of us have written books on tactics. My goal is to get other people thinking properly about the deeper issues, especially about their own convictions if they're contrary to Christianity, and to have a training manual to help Christians to...
Now, you can just feel like there is no doubt in Greg Koukl's mind right now that he's believing something false. It's like, I have the truth. I got to help people think critically and properly so they can see the truth that I have. And I just wonder how often Greg Koukl can see that type of confidence in people with false beliefs. But anyhow, he believes he has the truth, and it just has to somehow get people to ask them the right questions so they can see the truth.
Help guide them in conversations with others to consider the truth. There are some similarities between our books. In many ways, I have to tip my hat to Peter Bogosian because he's very ironic in his presentation. That is, he's very friendly and diplomatic. He does not want to get into arguments with people. He wants to garden, to use my language, not his. That is, let's do a little bit here, a little bit there. He's telling his disciples to help them have an influence on religious folk and their convictions. All of these things are, I think, smart, and they're all in my own tactics book. There's a big difference, though, between the two of them. Oh, one other similarity is
Yeah, the big difference is one leads people to eternal life and one leads people to hell. Now, they will never, ever say this, but this is the real issue. I actually asked Peter Bogosian, it's not Peter Bogosian, Greg Koukl, the question of why Christian parents cry when their youth leave. And he wouldn't answer it. He asked me to answer it, so I answered it for him. Then he agreed with it. Number one, because it leads their children to hell. Number two, because it leads to the moral debauchery, chicanery of society, the moral decay of society, and that they think their child will have all these problems growing up if they leave Christianity. And so, but for the Peter Bogosian disciples, there is no, there's nothing like that. It's more or less asking the person to critically examine why they believe something. It doesn't have this baggage attached to it like I think the Christians have, at least Greg Koukl's version of Christianity.
Encourages his people to ask lots and lots and lots of questions. So if you're familiar with the book I wrote on tactics, I call that the Columbo tactic, and there are different ways to use it. But we have very different purposes for our questions. I care about the facts. I care about the truth, and I not only care about the truth.
Greg Koukl, okay, I want you to imagine, okay, I'll put it on myself. You care about the facts, you care about the truth, right? It doesn't matter what you care about if you're trying to save me. What you should be caring about is me. What I care about and how to help me see the truth of Christianity. How are you going to do that, Greg Koukl? And I think what he does is very similar to SE. He'll ask, well, why do you believe that? How did you come to, what do you mean? How did you come to that conclusion? And I think that's great. That's a great way to do it. But why in the world, what does it matter what you care about if you're trying to help me see the truth? You have to now get me to somehow help me help myself and change my views. And that's exactly what Peter Bogosian is talking about. It's what Mike Winger said himself. It's the view of, if I don't believe this, I'll become a nihilist. I won't have true beauty and morality and all these things. It's the love, fear, hope, meaning, purpose. These are the things that drive humans to believe what they believe. And this is what I think you are discovering when you ask the questions like, what do you mean? And what Peter Bogosian has discovered when he spent all that time in, prisons, talking to people, helping do cognitive coaching. Street epistemology is basically cognitive coaching.
Because I think Peter Bogosian does as well. He thinks his view is true, and he cares about that. But I care about how people get there. I want to encourage Christians to be able to use questions in an appropriate way to help clarify what the truth actually is, and to get them thinking substantively about that, and training ordinary folk, ordinary Christians, to be able to help those who don't agree with them to think in that fashion. However,
to help ordinary folk reach people like me. So why in the world would you waste time talking to a guy like me if the real reason why I reject the resurrection of Jesus Christ is because I was hurt in church, or because God didn't heal my sister of her paralysis, her MS? You're wasting your time if you spend hours and hours talking about the minimal facts or the cosmological argument. You need to meet me where I'm at, Greg Koukl. And this is what street epistemology and what the Columbo tactic does do. By the way, I wasn't hurt in church, and I'm not an atheist because of my sister's illness.
That is not Peter Bogosian's project. He does not care about the facts one way or another. He doesn't want his disciples to be arguing for atheism or against any religious view. He wants them to do just one thing, and that is to cause the people they talk with use the questions to create psychological doubt. And when you look at the particulars in Peter Bogosian...
And psychological doubt in Christianity is, I think, the opposite of faith, the opposite of trust. It's like, how can you trust your wife if you doubt her all the time? Like that. So doubt is a sin if it's taken too far. Now, if doubt leads you to more truth and more of Jesus, then it's good, right? But if it doesn't, it's bad. And so I think this is why there's such a huge fear of street epistemology, because it is effective in lowering confidence, in lowering that trust.
Bogosian's book, he doesn't always do that in a legitimate way. That is, there are logical fallacies that are involved in his approach.
Kevin Martin, yes, the truth and God are synonyms. God is the truth, except, well, through Jesus, the person of Jesus. Jesus is the truth, capital T.
And almost, I would consider, somewhat abusive, intellectually abusive approaches that he takes, and ways that he uses questions, as long as he can get the other person to doubt.
Intellectually abusive. Now that's a pretty big charge. I think it's possible and even plausible in some situations that people can abuse other people intellectually. But when someone enters a conversation willingly, do they have to know all the motives behind a person in order to enter that conversation? That's the question. Now, some people say, yeah, And I tend to put all my cards on the table. If anybody does their due diligence, I don't even have to. They know who I am and the questions I ask. All they have to do is watch some of my videos. But if I was to go on the street, am I being intellectually abusive by asking these questions, types of questions? If I ask someone, say, hey, would you like to talk about the deeply held belief? And they say yes. And they might not even know what they're getting themselves into. And what if it does cause them to lose sleep that night? What if they do have doubts that cause them to cry or be sorrowful? Like, has now that person, that interviewer, done something wrong? I struggle with this. I think in some cases, yeah, that could be a mistake, a bad thing. But I tend to lean towards treating humans, adults, as adults and not treating them as infants. Now, I don't talk to, just to be safe, I don't talk to anybody under 18 years old. I try not to. I just talked to a guy on Discord the other day, and guy was 14. I kind of, oh man. And so on the internet, you don't know who you're talking to. And so, yeah, it's a tough question, because some people you can really mess up by just asking some questions. So I'm empathetic to what Greg Koukl is saying here, but that is still a pretty heavy charge.
What he thinks is false, but doubt it for whatever reason, then he's happy. I want people to doubt what they think is false, but I want to give them good reasons why. I want to deal with the issues.
Thanks,
so
Kevin.
In some ways there are similarities, and insofar as there are similarities, I think his book is virtuous. But the end, or the way that he gets to the end, from my perspective, is a big concern. In fact, I've written a piece in Solid Ground going out at the beginning of May to those who receive that from Stand to Reason. And you can get it at sdr.org. It'll be featured there right after the 1st of May. It's called Tactics for Atheists. And here I take on the approach of Peter Bogosian and why and how to guard against it, basically, if you're a Christian. And you guard.
Why do you have to guard against it? Like, when you think of the word guard, you're protecting something. Why do you feel the need to protect something, Greg? See, they use these words like guard because they do think it's like the worst thing ever to leave Christianity, because it's true, and because, life is just a vapor here on planet Earth. What really counts is eternity, because this is just a doormat for what's to come. And so if you leave Christianity, there's a chance you're going to mess up what's to come, heaven and hell. Greg Koukl got really upset when I basically summarized Christianity as a worldview of carrots and sticks. But really, if you believe that life on earth here is just a vapor of things to come, and if carrots is heaven and sticks is hell, those are the things to come, then yes, Christianity is a worldview that's mostly about carrots and sticks.
Guard against it by seeing its flaws. And I think it is flawed the way he approaches it. I think his ideas are wrong. Generally speaking, he's an atheist. But I think the way he...
His ideas are wrong. Generally speaking, he's an atheist.
trains other atheists to go about dealing with it is not virtuous either. It's not intellectually virtuous. And that's a big difference between Dr. Bogosian and myself, because I care about being intellectually virtuous at every step of the way.
Awesome.
Yeah, so Peter Bogosian is not intellectually virtuous every step of the way. That's another big claim.
So very excited to have Greg Koukl take the time to do that real quick today. And I hope that this answers a question that might be in a skeptic's mind, or maybe someone who's a street epistemologist who's watching this video and they're like, Mike, what's wrong with asking questions? Well, nothing's wrong with asking questions. We love questions, but you shouldn't pretend that that's what this really is. It's using questions.
It's using questions to lead the youth to hell. This is what they're thinking.
Not just asking them. It's using questions to instill psychological doubt in people because they can't account for difficult things like, how do you know that, how do you know that, how do you know that, dialing it all the way back. Well, even philosophers struggle with some of that kind of stuff. And we should be going for truth, not questions.
Yes, we should be trying to aim at truth and using questions to get there. And trying to figure out if we have good reasons to believe things. Now, again, you use the tactics of Greg Koukl or Peter Bogosian if a Christian uses these on a Mormon or a Muslim or even me, all this becomes like, oh, yeah, this is a good idea. But when it's used on them, it's like, no, this is very, very bad. Intellectually disingenuous.
That's the thing. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why street epistemology has become so attractive and why so many people are ready to read 3 pages of this book and then just go start doing it, is because his avoid facts tactic. I'm just going to ask questions, try to get you to doubt, and then move along. That's it. I just want to instill psychological doubt in you. That's all. My job is done if I get you to just question what you believe. And that's...
Wouldn't you want people who believe false things to question what they believe, Mike? Of course you would. Because you believe you have the truth of Jesus Christ. Jesus is the truth. So if someone like me does not believe that, don't you want me to doubt my atheism? Whatever that means. Don't you just want me to, just for a second, to consider the possibility I'm wrong? Mike, are you willing to consider the possibility that you're wrong? Just for a second? I mean, not just a little bit wrong. I mean a lot wrong. Are you willing to consider that today, that you could be totally wrong about your worldview, about Christianity? Are you willing to consider that? Any person who says no to that type of question, I think, doesn't value this thing we call truth. If you're not open to considering the possibility that you might not currently possess it.
That's the general view of things. And you know this if you've encountered people who use this tactic. It feels like you're being manipulated because you are.
Or maybe, I agree, Mike, sometimes maybe it is pure manipulation. But maybe at times it feels that way because people don't have answers. They haven't thought it through. Maybe they feel they've been manipulated because they do feel internally stupid. And so this is a defense mechanism. It's your fault, you manipulated me. Like when I ask a question of a Christian who says to me, I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit last night at church. And I start questioning them, how would you figure out if that feeling was from the Holy Spirit versus something else? How would you figure that out? And we go down that line, and I bring the outsider test of faith of people of other religions having feelings of the presence of a deity, and yet you think they're clearly wrong. Like, have I manipulated them? Or have I just basically asked questions that are very difficult for a Christian to answer? The Christians all the time say they feel the leading of Jesus. They feel the leading of God in their life in a certain area. How would you tell the difference between that actual leading and just your brain thinking that it's God's leading, but maybe it isn't? And, you know, Christians, I've asked that question. Christians have answers. Well, it has to be in line with Scripture and blah, blah, blah. But something can be in line with Scripture and still not from God. It just was your own brain. How would you tell the difference? These are the type of questions that feel like you're manipulating them intellectually, but really they're just great questions that show that what you think you know, you might not. In fact, you probably don't know because of all the various examples of people on this planet who have similar experiences and end up having contradictory conclusions. I think we're done here.
But guess what? The street epistemologist who's manipulating someone else by asking them questions has first been manipulated. That's why they're doing it in the first place. And that's what I wanted to make this video about. Now, I asked you guys for questions a couple times. I said, hey, we're going to prioritize.
Okay, and I already played this at the very beginning, and this is why I did this video, because Mike was basically begging questions from street epistemologists. And my name was brought up once, but in the chat it was brought up several times by people, at least a couple times. So that's another reason why I played this. So what do I say in conclusion here? I think the goal is, if you're a Christian, if you hear the word atheist or street epistemology, the goal of this video that Mike's produced, and Greg Kokel and Tim Barnett, What they're saying is be on guard. Wear the full armor of God. Have the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit. Do I remember all these? The helmet of. So some Christian help me. I used to know all of it. But the apologist, the Christian leader, pastor, they want you to be on guard. Like when you hear the word atheist, like you need to stiffen up a little bit and be prepared. If you hear PineCreek or any other street epistemologist type person start to ask you questions, like get ready. This is what's going to happen. They're going to manipulate you. They're going to use maybe even Jedi mind tricks. And if what you believe is true, guys, I'm talking to you Christians right now. If what you believe is true, just look stupid. It's okay. Declare defeat on yourself. Say, yeah, great question. I don't know. Yeah, I'm probably wrong here because of this. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, just admit it. What's the downside of that if what you believe is true? Be vulnerable. Instead of having to look good in front of your, I'm talking to apologists now, instead of trying so hard to look good in front of your followers, that you have all the answers, just be a little vulnerable and say, yeah, it does seem like only Christians see prophecy the way they do. Maybe consider that. Yeah, I do have the minority view on this, and I don't agree with consensus. Like, admit that. Yeah, I totally understand that most people, even Christians, don't think the Gospels are written by eyewitnesses. Like, just admit it. Just admit the weaknesses. I think they know Objectively Dan's story in fear, says Brian Stevens. Thank you for the donation. Yeah, I think you're right. Objectively Dan is a guy who has his own YouTube channel called Truth Wanted, and he deconverted because of Anthony Magnabosco's videos. Ken McCracken thinks I'm hyper skeptical. I think you'd be on my side, Ken, if I told you I was hyper skeptical of all the religions of the world but Christianity. I think you would say, yes, I agree with you, Doug. You should be hyper skeptical of all religions but Christianity. But, you know, I have deconverted a lot of people. Not going out on the street, but I get emails just like Christians get, Christian YouTubers like Mike here. I'm sure they get emails saying, Mike, thank you for your ministry. You've helped me come to the Lord. I think most of the times it's backslidden Christians coming back or doubting Christians becoming more fervent, but maybe there's some full-fledged non-Christians who become Christians because of YouTubers like Mike. But I get emails from Christians, former Christians, to say I was a big part of them leaving Christianity. So, and I don't think I'm a pure SEer, but I'm just asking questions and bringing up comments and points to show that a lot of these pastors and apologists, they're not telling, I really don't think they're being honest and vulnerable with their followers. I really don't. And the internet, of course, is changing things dramatically. Thanks, Doug. It was a fun chat. Let's save ourselves and help our friends. Ayahuasca? What's a ayahuasca journey? Kevin? Sorry for my ignorance. Ken, there's always vast differences between Christianity and other religions. A Mormon would say the same thing. There's vast differences between your version of Christianity and theirs. Uniqueness does not make something true, more likely to be true. PineCreek, are you ready for your deepest spiritual journey? Asked Raul. Sure, bring it on. I want what Tim Barnett said earlier in this live stream. He said he was talking about great evidence that Jesus did, hearing the man who was paralyzed. Please send serotonin. Asks, so are you more comfortable with deconverting people? No, I'm still uncomfortable with it. Because I know how much pain and sorrow in the short term, actually, leaving a religion feels really good at the beginning, and then reality hits later, and there's a lot of issues to deal with, family, friends, so forth. So I don't feel good. And I'm on record of telling people to stay Christian. The type of people I'm actually happy to deconvert are those who are already experiencing severe cognitive dissonance right now. Thank you, DB Cisco. Thank you for your donation, the devil's number. Those people who have cognitive dissonance right now and hopefully are old and already have a career, so they don't have to rely on their parents for money, their Christian parents for money. And that they're kind of stable, mature in life, that they can handle it. Now, guys like Mike, he could never, no way, could he leave Christianity? Because now this is his sole source of income right now. So he's being paid to believe this, number one. And number two, I think he needs it. And he would admit he needs it. Ayahuasca is how you meet God? Oh, okay. Sure, I'd love to meet God. What do I need to do to meet God? Whatever your answer is for Christianity, I think I've done it a few times before. That's nothing. Christians, they accept Jesus into their heart more than once. You guys realize that, right? They at least 10 times a Christian will accept Jesus into their heart because they doubt that they're even saved. Okay, now let me start the music so I have a reason to leave. I don't think so, Serotonin, that Mike has commented on the Clergy Project. Not that I've heard. Some funny comments. Doorknob, 1,000 pine points. Yes, I do watch my own videos when I'm done. I used to watch them at 2, 3x, try to learn from them. Believe it or not, I like my content. I entertain myself. I love it when I make mistakes too, because it gives me opportunities to correct. My apologies to Mike Winger. He actually texted me, wanted to come on, but we ran out of time. You're very welcome, Trevor. Have a good night, Christy. Hey, Ken McCracken. It's okay to doubt.